Is your team not performing well? Is morale low and turnover high? Are you falling further behind the competition? I'm here to help. I'm your host, Shani, and this is the Leadership Show, where business strategy and culture finally meet, and we make the long-awaited shift from rhetoric to results. I promise I'm not your typical boring leadership consultant, and I will help you get your shift together. Let's do this. Welcome, Leadershifters, to another episode of the Leadership Show with Shani. It is my pleasure today to be joined by a great friend and leadership consulting collaborator, Noelle Dye. Noelle joins us here from Boston. How are you, Noelle?
Hi, Shani. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well. So you guys and gals, Noelle is a innovation accelerator and, of course, a leadership coach and an expert in design thinking. And that's really, besides the fact that she's a brilliant woman, I specifically invited her to come on the show today to talk about design thinking and how it can be applied to the current situation with COVID so it can help leaders manage through and beyond COVID-19. So that's going to be our focus today. What do you say?
That sounds great.
Excellent. So first of all, I hope you and your family have all been safe and healthy and managing as well as possible.
We're doing great. Thanks, Shani. We've done our part by staying home as best as we can.
Ditto.
Even though it's driving us crazy, and we're working out how to get along.
Nice.
Well, how about you? Yeah.
Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to be quarantined in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and we have had spectacular weather for the last 6-7 weeks that we've been quarantined, and I've been able to get outside and rollerblade and walk and cycle and whatever. So I've at least been getting some fresh air and some outdoor exercise, which I know is not the case for many of you in the Northeast who have had a late winter,
Yeah, it's been chilly. It's raining like crazy today, but we did have a nice day yesterday and the day before, so that's
right.
Good.
You gotta take the little gifts when they come.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. That's right. And people are out walking around and staying away from one another, which is nice. But it's been great. We've been able to go outside too. We just wear a winter coat. That's all.
Right. All right, so let's start off by getting design thinking 101 for those people who have sort of heard of it but don't really know what it is. In its essence, what is design thinking?
The design thinking is the process of understanding a customer at a level of empathy such that you can design what they really need.
Oh.
Yeah. So often the design process or product development process is about an idea, a flash of insight. And then we spend a lot of time on how to make it work. And we leap into the solution, right? We leap into getting in there and solving it and making it and adding to our portfolio of products because we're assuming that somebody wants this. We might use market research to determine what the gap is in the market and then go after that. Design thinking is really understanding what makes people tick around that problem.
Okay. So give us a couple of examples of projects either that you have personally worked on applying the design thinking process with a customer, sort of Reader's Digest version A to Z, or even something that just might be high profile in the world that people might know. Oh, I know that product, and that's how that happened.
Yeah. So I'm best known for. I always say I'm best known for 3 products that I worked on over the course of my career, which was a very long career. I'll say the first one last because that's the one that most people will know. I'm most well known for the Rethink Robotics robots, which are a social interface robot that is a cobot, so you can stand beside it and work with it safely. They started the cobot field so that robots can stand and do menial labor tasks, really, and anybody can train them.
Okay.
That's an area. And then the other one that I'm known for is the Innovative Spinal Technologies is now owned by another company, but we were a startup that worked in spine surgery implants and instruments that preserved motion in the spine. Most people end up having their spines fused if they have a lot of pain.
Mm-hmm.
This was to preserve motion. So I worked on
Nice.
those things. Minimally invasive. I also am known for many of the instruments that we created for other kinds of implants. And then the third one is the Swiffer. So that was, yeah, that's the one that was at the kind of the beginning of design thinking. Nobody was really calling it then. That was a project that I did for Procter & Gamble. I was working for a company called Continuum, and I had a business partner in the company, Harry West, and he and I were assigned floor cleaning through Procter & Gamble, and that's where the Swiffer came from.
And you were like, fuck, really? We just got a floor cleaning project? Like, what the hell do we do with that?
Exactly. It was like, what? Oh, we're going to innovate. We're going to disrupt. This was a long time ago. This is before anybody even talked about it. We're going to make something new. Okay, I'm in.
Yeah.
Right?
So you're like, okay, so how do we make the mop more exciting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
And I'm assuming,
how do we clean? Yeah. Well, what happened was, the man that we were working for on some other projects, came to us and said, there's got to be a better way to clean a floor. And we agreed. So we went out and did a whole bunch of work in consumers' homes, which was really, like I said, it was before design thinking was design thinking. It was my part. Harry, as my business partner, was in charge of the science and the technology piece, and I was in charge of what he used to refer to as the irrational. I was in charge of what people felt and what they measured as being a gold standard of clean, and all of that soft stuff.
yeah.
So I had to come up with a plan and a process for going out and understanding what would really work, what people really needed, and then what would really work.
Got it. Okay. Well, I have to say, if I knew that about you, I had forgotten it, because I am a longtime Swiffer fan and user, and I've got Swiffer in my closet and multiple packages of the wet wipes as well as the dry wipes.
Yeah, I know. I think that was the highlight of my career, only because when people find out, they give me hugs. I get a lot of hugs. Thank you for doing that. Yeah. But, to your point, it was a stressful time trying to innovate. Right. And that's something I wanted to, I know because of your leadership, the whole concept of what you do here, I wanted to talk to you about that. That was a time where we were trying to solve it. We were using all of our intellect. We were going out and doing all kinds of scientific studies. We were looking at market data. We were doing all the things that people typically did. And at the same time, we winged it. I sat down and said, well, maybe we should go watch people clean. That'll be different, right? And we asked people not to clean their homes before we got there. And what we found very quickly is that people were cleaning before we got there. And in typical fashion, everybody on my team was saying, we got to figure out how to not have that happen, because Harry was interested in seeing how they cleaned and what they used and all the soaps and all that.
Sure.
But instead we sat back and we looked at it and we said, what does this mean? It meant that people wanted to appear clean, which fed into the product, right? What do you do with a Swiffer? Just before someone comes over, you grab it and you clean up.
Yep.
Right? Whereas back in those days, what we saw a lot of, Shani, was I saw people with mops in their backyard that had been there for 6 months.
Oh, right. And they're collecting dust and bugs and they're disgusting.
That's exactly it. Many people never cleaned their floors. They said they did, but they never did.
Right.
So all these behaviors were in place. And that's the kind of thing that design thinking really digs into.
Okay.
What is true for people?
I love that.
What does this mean? It means that people want to appear clean. It needs to be instantaneous clean. It drove us to something that you could just quickly grab and quickly clean up because someone was on their way over.
Well, what you're speaking to, and I think maybe you verbally underscored the word trying. We were trying to innovate, and that was putting your energy in the wrong place, right? Because that came after you understood what the true behaviors were that you were trying to innovate on. So we talk about that so much in leadership is, people rush into doing.
Oh yeah.
Before they have all the information, or they're exerting energy in the wrong places. So I think that's really key, and also a good segue to, you said it was a really hard time, like we're trying to innovate in a place that maybe didn't need innovation or wasn't that exciting of a venue to innovate, but turns out it was, right? And so we might say the same things about COVID and what small, medium, and large business owners and entrepreneurs and leaders out there trying to innovate in a space that may seem less than exciting right now. So let's go ahead and dive into that conversation.
Yeah, COVID, what I'm seeing right now, Shani, is that people are fighting over whether or not they should go back to work, and they're not really stopping and saying, where do we want to be when this is over? Like, thinking also starts with the end in mind.
Right.
What outcome do we want? How do we want to be? What do we want to hold on to from the past? And what do we want to let go of? I mean, I was having this conversation with somebody the other day. If you look at parallel, this is one of the things I like to do, is look at parallel examples. In the course of my lifetime, we had the AIDS epidemic, which changed everything, right? You don't get your blood drawn without somebody wearing gloves and a mask, or, they're protecting themselves. Blood became a biohazard. So we just adapted. Everything adapted to it. Mm-hmm. All of the solutions came after that. Like the Tylenol scare, right? Now we have containers that you are safe. And that has changed consumers' expectations. You walk into a store now, and if the box is open, you don't want it.
That's right.
Right? Back in before that, you paid attention to those kinds of things. So my point is that, where do we want to be when we're back at work? How do we want to be together? What do we want to hold on to? We want to hold on to connection. We're all missing that terribly right now. It's pretty clear to me. I don't know if you're feeling it, but I am. I mean, it's nice that we can talk to each other this way, but it would be so much better if we could be in person.
I know. I always say, this is a total tangent, but a question I often ask my clients when I first start to work with them, even executives, is, if you could have one superpower, what would it be? Just to kind of get into people's psyche a little bit.
Yeah.
And then they always want to know, they answer the question, and then they always want to know what mine is. And mine is to have the I dream of genie ability to teletransport myself from place A to place B, just by blinking my head, or blinking my eyes, shaking my head, and doing this with my arms.
Yeah, just like Genie. That was exactly right. Yeah.
Yes. And just because I love travel and would much rather be in person with people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and so, and in an intuitive way, what that brings to you. But what is it consciously, right? What's conscious about that is that you feel things when you're around people. You get a better sense of what's going on in the space. I was reading something this weekend that is so true from National Geographic about how we're many of us are finding we're exhausted from Zoom. Because we can't read what's happening. We have to pay attention to, especially if you're in a gallery, with a bunch of other people. You're meeting with you and I are alone right now, but there are many people in the meeting. You're trying to pay attention to all of them. You can't just feel it. When you're in the room, you can feel. You and I both know, everybody does know what it's like to walk into a room of people, and you could cut the tension with a knife.
Yep.
Or you could cut, or they're all laughing, and you feel it as soon as you come in the room.
Right. You feel the ebullience in the air.
Exactly. You just can't feel that right now. So we know we don't want to lose that.
Yep.
See it. We can observe it in human behavior too, even in the places where we're social distancing. You can see people are struggling really hard with doing that. They still want to be near each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so what's the implication of that for, let's just say, a mid-level manager in a corporate organization?
That's a good question. I think the question is, what outcome? You want people to feel connected, so how can you help them feel connected?
Okay.
And still be protected from one another.
Connected yet protected.
Connected and protected. Yeah.
Okay.
So it requires that we change our behavior. If you over constrain it by legislation, which is what you're seeing around our country right now, right? Some places are just, people are fighting it because they're feeling over constrained. It's not going to work. People won't do it. And then you'll be frustrated. And this happens in my coaching, right? People are frustrated that people won't do what they ask them to do. Well, you have to find a place where they are willing to meet you there, right? You have to meet them where they are, and you have to find a place where they're willing to meet you. So the question is, how do you maintain what they need and also protect them, right?
Yeah, and there's something about having two things that seem on the surface irreconcilable, and how do you make them coexist? Like you can have, like, I forget what the term is, but how do you make things that seem opposite each other work together versus,
I always say, that there's a tension, and I use this term when I'm teaching people about design thinking or innovation. When things are in tension, when they're pulling from each other in opposite directions, if you solve that, you have destruction, you have disruption, you have innovation, right? It's when you try to only solve one that you have a kind of solution, or you have protests. People are trying to solve the fact that they're being controlled versus finding something that balances both of those tensions.
Okay, so solve. All right, so I've written down a couple things so far to just pause for those of you, make sure you're getting the gems here in terms of what happens when people are coming back to work after COVID. How can we help them stay connected yet stay protected? And making sure that those things aren't mutually exclusive. And how do we solve the tension, and whether that is the tension of people who are still working at home and people who are now in the office versus, favoring one over the other. How do we solve the tension of, a product quagmire, or client relationship, right? So that it's balanced. I like this. This feels like a position of strength.
And then when you solve both, you have disruption, right?
Yeah.
The tension goes away. It's an instant. I mean, go back to the Swiffer for a second. It's an instant clean, right? The way that was working is that the technologists we were working with were pursuing cleaner and cleaner floors. If you remember advertising from before the Swiffer, it was always about how you could put your baby down and they could eat off the floor. Who cares, right? People weren't even really cleaning their floors.
Right, and who really, even with the cleanest floors, is going to let their baby eat off the floor?
Exactly. Well, some of us might.
Well, I guess that is the thing, though. Babies and dogs will just take things that have been on the floor and put it in their mouth.
That's right.
They're not cognizant of the germs. Yeah.
So one of the things we did was we learned, one of my pursuits was finding out what the gold standard of clean was, and it was literally running your hands across the surface and seeing if there was grit. And it just needed to look shiny, and that's it. It did not need to be antiseptic, right? So it's also understanding that. And in the case of people coming back to work, to your question, people coming back to work and how are they feeling safe? That's what you need to address. Are they feeling safe? Are they feeling protected? And are they feeling connected? Because I don't know about you, Shani, but most of the people I know are desperate to get back to work. They're desperate to be back around people. And they're nervous at the same time. They're nervous about what that means. So what that looks like could be a mask, or it could be something different. But if we go right to masks, then we're not really understanding what the problem is. We're not spending time really understanding what people need.
Right. And safe has more than just the physical components. And in fact, I kind of hope that the whole psychological safety piece gets attention now in the the overall construct of safety, because now companies are obviously focused on what is the physical health safety. And as someone who's so focused on the culture of leadership in organizations and psychological safety, what does that look like now when we come back and our organizations and teams more willing to entertain that as well?
Yeah, yeah, you're bringing up a space that I play a lot in, which is actually saying what's true, right? And allowing somebody to have their feelings.
Yeah.
So they're feeling unsafe. Don't tell them not to, or just move on. You'll be okay. Just because
Yeah.
it's not okay, just because you have some discomfort with it, doesn't mean that you should allow somebody else to air it. Because you and I both know, once you air it, you can move on, right?
Yeah.
You feel safer. And having somebody listen and see you and say, I see that. Thank you for telling me. I don't have a solution yet, but I'm working on it, is a much better leadership model than just be it's okay, you're safe. Don't worry. Everything's fine. Yeah, that's just not going to address it, right?
Yeah.
Is that where you were headed? That kind of thing?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because like safety means so many different things. And just because, right, maybe people are safe from germs doesn't mean they're safe from retribution, retaliation, right? All the things that happen when you say what's true or
When you
name the
say what's
elephant in the
true.
room.
Yeah. Yeah. When you call out the elephant in the room and you have psychological safety, it means that somebody else, I mean, you have to have psychological safety in order to do design thinking. You have to. You have to be able to go out on a limb and try something. I mean, it's all about failure, right? A big part of the process is having a notion, test and building a prototype and then testing it. And
Right.
you're trying to fail, because the faster you fail, the more often you fail.
I love it.
You learn, right? It's definitely a scientific process. I'm always saying scientists are the most creative people on the face of the planet, because they are absolutely trying to fail. They are setting out a hypothesis and then going out and seeing if it's true. And it's great. You get a pat on the back if you're right, but it's even better if you've learned, well, no, that's not what's true. Here's what is true.
Mm-hmm.
And design thinking is the same process. So testing things out with people when they come back to work too, not saying, here's a solution, you will take this, shove it down their throats and say, this is what we're doing, but find out how they feel about it.
Got it. So what kind of narrative or conversation do you find is effective with clients to get more comfortable with failure? Because people hate failure, right? It's like, I think fear of failure is bigger than FOMO for most people, especially, those who work in organizations where, they're getting reviewed and, all that, entrepreneurs more comfortable with failure because they have less eyes on them.
Right.
And, you work in a labyrinthine organization, bureaucratic, and all that sort of thing. Like, people do not like to fail. They often feel like they're putting their jobs at risk, or their client relationships at risk. So what do you find works for people to get them more comfortable with the idea of failing?
That's a good question, Shani. I think what you're describing is that the problem stems from the top down, right? I mean, I don't believe in performance reviews. When I think about it, it's someone else's judgment of your ability to deliver something that they're measuring in their own heads. Mm-hmm. It's an individual. I used to do them too, and I hated doing them because I used to think this person's strengths don't lie in this document. They are really good at this, and I need them to continue to do that. And there are places where they're stretching themselves that doesn't really show up on this performance review. So it was somebody's decision somewhere along the line that this is what they need to be able to do. And it's such a judgment, and it goes into negative emotions. People go into performance reviews worried about what they're going to hear. And if they hear great performance reviews, then they're just pumped up about how great they are around a piece of paper that somebody else judged them around. It's just, It's such a silly process. But anyway, we do have it because we do need to measure performance. And I guess where I'm headed with that is that failure is in somebody else's eyes.
Okay.
Right. So that judgment is your measure, is their measure of your success. And if I'm working with somebody who is reporting up to somebody, or I'm working on an innovation project, I always want to know, how will our success be measured from the beginning, right? It's designing that relationship with the person that you're working with. You got to know what's important to them, and it's not the stuff that's on the performance review, it's them personally.
Yeah.
Right. Like, they may be somebody that wants 3 elements of data to prove that everything that you say is true. And that may be different than their colleague who just wants to know that you're going to do this or you're going to do that. No examples are coming to mind, but I mean, just to go back and talk about that story again, in the case of the Swiffer, we were failing miserably in that project until we went to a presentation. Well, we learned we were failing miserably in one presentation where the client was a little upset with us. And it didn't dawn on me until we were on the plane on the way home that we hadn't included soap in the product. They wanted to sell more soap. So it needed to be about soap. And we had been thinking about something else. So bam, in that moment, my colleague Jack Unlack and I invented the Swiffer wet jet. Because we went, oh, that's important to them. So that we were failing in somebody else's eyes. And once we figured out what their measure of success was, we could meet it, if that makes sense.
Okay. So it sounds like a couple things. One is continue to have the conversations about what is success in the eyes of the person to whom you're ultimately accountable.
Yeah.
And also just sort of don't take it personally, right? I mean, it's a little bit of like reframe failure to like, okay, so there's failure over here, but I'm not a failure as a human being because, right?
Yeah, I mean, that in and of itself is a big area of coaching, right? In order to, the way that I handle that with my clients, and especially in people in companies that want to be more innovative, the goal is to get started. Just get started. As soon as you start, you fail. You want to take a lot of small steps and not put a lot of effort into something to the point of perfection and then try it, because then the failure is enormous.
Right. Well, hence the MVP, right? In app development, right? If you spent your entire WA developing it till it was perfect, first of all, there is no such thing, right? Because there's always going to be updates and upgrades. Then, there'd be lots of money poured down the tube before you got proof of concept.
Right. And even MVP requires some time investment, right?
Yeah.
You can start with very low fidelity prototypes early and put them in front of people so that they can understand what they're looking at and they can give you feedback. Now, you don't want them to just yes and no you, because when things are different, people can't really tell you whether or not they're going to work, but you have to observe you have to use a lot of intuition in this area. You put something in front of somebody and you see how they react. You're looking for a physical, visceral reaction. They may be telling you one thing, but actually looking different, right? And notice that they keep touching it. What is it about that that's making you touch it? Well, they kind of like it, even though they're telling you that they don't, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's early and often. Once the MVP gets on the market, ideally you've been doing a lot of those tests all along.
Right. Yeah.
But you're getting at something really important though, Shani. A lot of people don't like to go and find out what somebody else thinks. They don't like to test it, right? So what's up with that? Right?
Yeah.
That's about being right. I don't want to know that I'm wrong.
God, you know what? That is so true. Like, would you rather be right or happy? Or instead, would you rather be right or successful?
Exactly. And that's really ultimately at the core of fear of failure. So we like to be right. It's good to be right.
Let's pause right here and ask the question. And the reason I've got such a smile on my face is it's a guilty smile.
Okay.
Because it's like, I do hate to be wrong. And I've gotten better at it over the years, engaging full opinion or, others' opinions to get the full story and to get the diversity of thought and all that sort of thing. And at the end, I don't know, because I am, sort of type A, overachieving, I do still like to be proven right from the data. So
Sure.
I'm going to say guilty of in searching those other opinions, confirmation bias.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
look for opinions that aren't going to give you confirmation of what you already think.
Yeah. I mean, psychologically, right, being right stems from our worthiness, right? We want to feel worthy. I'm always trying to help people practice finding worthiness in other places besides their innovation.
Yeah.
Right.
Which again is about redefining failure. Like, it's only failure if you let it defeat you. And I'm saying this and also absorbing it as
it's hard. It's really hard.
I say it. And maybe, sort of like you said a minute ago, get started, right? So what's the first small step you can take?
Mm-hmm.
Small wins is another thing. We as consultants love to set up with our clients. Okay. Yes, over the lifespan of the project, this is what we want to get to, but here are the small wins or gates along the way, right? Well, how about looking at what are the small failures that we can tolerate and bounce back from and learn from and not get defeated from, so that we start to get more comfortable with failure as success instead of failure as the worst thing that could ever happen to us.
Exactly. Right. Of a loss of that I'm not worthy.
Yeah.
I'm not, like, I'm terrible. Right.
So,
and that yeah.
I started to ask my viewers and listeners a question and went deep into, here's why I'm asking it, because I'm guilty of it. So let me ask that question. How many are you? Just, right, this is a one-way conversation because you can't respond back to me right now, but maybe in the comments you can, like, what parts of you are guilty of avoiding failure and of avoiding getting opinions that may not match yours and getting information that isn't just like confirming what you already know. So I want you guys to think about those things and own it. If it for you, as it sometimes is for me, is a challenge, and that's okay, right? The first step is admitting you have a problem.
Yeah. And it's a pretty consistent problem, right? It is if you look at a team, the team dynamics, when I've led teams through innovation, it's often about being right. Everybody on the team wants to feel right. It's why Yes and is such a great tool for that, right?
Yes, love Yes and.
Yes and is such a nice way of helping their behaviors to even say yes. Although most of us are really saying yes and, but underneath we're saying not really. Right? Like when I'm building on your idea, I'm really taking it in another direction, but that's okay. It's an attempt towards making everybody right. So if people can feel like they're worthy, then they will be able to fail more, to learn.
Right, exactly. So how do we get in touch with our worthiness? And again, this is where you and I talk to clients about all the time, redefining how we measure ourselves from external validation to I am clear about this, about myself. These are my values, and that's what I take from inside out to the world, and I can feel good about myself whether I succeeded in the minds of others or failed.
Yeah. You're touching on an area that I think about a lot, Shani. In corporate world, you mentioned entrepreneurs before. They tend to be people who have an idea and they're so driven to go and fulfill it, right? They're just driven to do that. In the corporate world, we have all this hierarchy, we have all these layers of judgment. And it really, what you just described stems from the top. If there's worthiness in the person at the top and they recognize everybody else's worth, then you have an environment where there's psychological safety, right? You can see if somebody has an issue, you can name the thing that's in the room. You can actually turn to somebody and saying, this is happening right now. And you do it in a non-violent way so that everybody feels like they can express themselves and they're okay. I'm okay. and there's no shame, right? Now, but you're also describing is that we often work with people who report up and sideways down, right? And they have to on worthiness. It has to come from inside. You're absolutely right. It has to be, you are valid, you are human, and you're worthy. You're incredibly important here. I've certainly been in situations myself where I've been in charge of a project trying to fail, and yet everybody around me is freaked out. Right? They're like, no, because they're all trying to be, they don't want to fail. They don't really want to know what the customer thinks. They just want to be right. And it's even then I have to find my own worthiness. It can be exhausting. Yes,
absolutely.
See, big sigh.
Yeah. So I'm conscious of podcast time, external validation of what makes a good podcast is that it doesn't go on too long, right?
Yeah, there you go. It's true.
So let me pivot and ask this. So if you've got a leader or a manager who has never really worked with design thinking before, but is intrigued enough to say, oh, I kind of like what I'm hearing, how would you advise them to get started?
Good question. There are so many resources out there. There's a lot of really great books. And I won't really tout one over the other because they're all my colleagues and I want them all to get recognition. You can also hire companies. There are companies that come in and train on how to do it. The first and foremost, the most important thing for people to know, however, is that when I mentioned the project, the Swiffer, that was before design thinking existed. And there was no process. We were making it up as we went along. And I want you to know that you can do that. The key is that you just need to go out and understand the customer. And that doesn't mean asking them questions through a survey and getting their feedback, because a survey, you have to design the answers in order to write the questions. Yeah. This is more open-ended. Go out and observe what's happening. There's 3 ways to do it. Observe what's happening and be really objective about it and not attached to the outcome. Like I said, people weren't even cleaning their floors, or they were cleaning before we came. And we were trying to control the situation until we stopped and said, what is this about? What is the meaning here? So observe what's happening, become the customer, walk a mile in their shoes. Yeah. Try whatever it is that they're trying to do. And the third one is to engage them, to ask for their feedback, show them things and see what comes up. Don't write down everything that they say as verbatim, like this is what's true. You do want to collect what they say so you can show it to other people, but you want to try to listen beyond their words. Right. And find out what's really true. Yeah. Anybody can do that right away.
Love it. Okay. So in order to understand your customer, which is essentially all design thinking is, right? Yes. And so before I even review the 3 steps that you said, people think design thinking, oh, it has to be a new product, right? So if my company isn't a CPG, well, then design thinking doesn't apply to me. Wrong. Right. Right. So you can apply, what are some of the other places that you've seen design thinking applied outside of consumer products?
Oh, everywhere. I mean, I named off 3, right? Medical devices. Even the robots that I worked in, they were in the manufacturing industry, right? I see design thinking being applied to leadership. And I see it being applied to social innovation. I use it all the time with my entrepreneur clients. It can be used anywhere, right? It is the process of understanding the customer and prototyping and failing fast so that you get to an answer. But you don't hold on to an idea. It is the whole process is getting to a place where it just emerges and you look at it and you say, that's the answer, because you've been,
And that is, and I love that feeling when you get that download of inspiration where you're like, I got it.
I got it. And then you go test it and you go, I didn't get it. But hey, I'm close. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So for those of you who are newbies to design thinking, or want to apply it in contexts that maybe are new for you, number 1, observe. Okay. So what are you seeing? Be objective and don't be attached to your own ideas, and don't be attached to being right. Become the customer, go observe them, put yourself in their shoes, like literally, not just in the BS of your own head, and engage them. And as you do, really listen, because what they aren't saying is oftentimes more important than what they are saying, right?
Yeah.
Because, you know, sort of what I heard you explain about Swiffer was the fact that they were cleaning before the researchers came was one of the key pieces of inspiration. And that wasn't necessarily the thing you went to find out at all.
Right. Not at
right?
all. No, it wasn't at all what we were there to find out.
But it was key to understanding their behavior and their needs, and
yes,
and the perceptions and all that good stuff. So, wow, there is so much here, and I love it. And I just want to encourage anyone who has listened or watched this to pause and give some thought to where you can apply this. And if you have any questions, how can they reach you, Noelle?
Oh, I'm not on social media necessarily, except for LinkedIn. And anybody is welcome to link in with me at any time. I'd love to chat with people over that platform.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah. Thanks again for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to see you, and hopefully we can get together in person before the end of the year. If I put that out as a goal.
As soon as possible, Shani. It was so good to see you too.
Yep.
Thanks.
Likewise. And Leadershifters, thank you for joining us today. And you know how to reach me. I am all over social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, etc. And Shani at theleadershipproject.com. Until next time. Mwah.